Hey guys, it's Alex from 7th Hour Films, back again with Merlin. Last time on Merlin, we had Queen of Hearts, where Morgana had a vision of the future, seeing Guinevere crowned Queen of Camelot with her husband, King Arthur. And so she tried to prevent this by exposing the relationship between Arthur and Gwen to Uther, and also framing Gwen for being a sorcerer, which meant that she would be burned at the stake. So I've completely lost all likability for Morgana because of that. Luckily, Merlin caught wind of this plan and disguised himself using an aging spell to become a false sorcerer, basically. He became an act sorcerer, where he was the sorcerer who actually enchanted both Arthur and Guinevere, and so he was going to be burned at the stake instead of Gwen. But he managed to escape before he, burned to death. And this caused great confusion for Morgana, the bitch. And yeah, that was pretty much that. That was also Old Man Merlin, his disguise. That was also one of the visions that Merlin had a few episodes back in the Crystal Cave. So that means there's only one vision left of Morgana on the throne. So we're going to have to see what that all means. But yeah, that's pretty much that. This is where I say no spoilers in the comments whatsoever. This is also where I say if you want to watch my reaction to this episode of Merlin, unfortunately it is not in this video due to copyright issues I've had in the past, so what you gotta do is head down in the description or to the pinned comment on this video and there's a link there. That link will take you to my reaction and you can watch it. It's probably like 10-ish minutes long. It's, just a normal reaction, and when you're done watching that, I would encourage you to pop back over to this YouTube video to watch the discussion for this episode, because that's always important. So yeah, that's pretty much that. Why don't we go ahead and get started on this episode of Merlin. Here we go. All right, what a good episode, man. Good episode. I do like that Uther acknowledges that Arthur threw the match, and that means that he is worthy to be king now. He's ready. He's ready to be a good king. He's an honorable man. So that was pretty cool. Okay, the guy that plays. Oh, okay. I was looking at the guy that played Gilly. I was like, that dude looks familiar. And I was like, I wonder who he is. And okay, so he started acting at the age of 10 in the Harry Potter films, playing the role of Dudley Dursley. All right. Well, that's pretty cool. It kind of looks like that's it, but all right. All right, that's pretty cool. Yeah, very, very interesting episode. Very, very interesting, man. I really liked Merlin's talk with the dragon. I thought that was pretty good, because first off, we haven't had a conversation with the dragon in a while. Even he was like, yeah, it's been a while. Kind of hoping you forgot about me, but no. So that was cool. Like, it was just like a nice, honest conversation too. There was no conflict between the two of them. So I did like that. But I guess we'll talk about that later. So we can go ahead and hop right into the notes. So the first two things I wrote down were open tournament with no rules. So, okay, this is interesting because, normally we do have a tournament early in the season. And I'm going to have to... Let me see. I guess I'll just close the episode. Did we have a tournament this season? Yeah, Gwen. That episode was a tournament. So we actually had 2 tournaments this season, which is pretty cool. Maybe that means we won't have a tournament in season 4. I don't know. But yeah. So this tournament was interesting. It wasn't the normal, yearly tournament where, we sort of change things up. This time around, it was just a straight up. I mean, I guess it was sort of like the tournament in season 1, with Knight Valiant. I guess it was more like that, where it is sort of open rules and everything, and I guess, but I mean, Uther wasn't in that, so it wasn't I guess the thing is that was for the knights, that was a tournament for knights, whereas this is, a complete open tournament, anyone's allowed to apply, basically. So that's pretty cool, but it was also a specific, tournament with brackets and everything, which was pretty cool. I wish we could see the brackets, while we're going, but oh well. I would actually be alright if they did like a couple episodes where it was just a large tournament, But maybe I'm thinking of, maybe that's just, the My Hero Academia in my head is like, I want the sports festival, I want the UA Sports Festival in Camelot, but no. So yeah, that was pretty cool that we had another tournament episode right, towards the end of the season, which I know, I believe the next 2 episodes are specifically a 2-parter, because it's just something I can't avoid because they specifically titled these Part 1 and Part 2, unlike Doctor Who where, they don't do that, basically. So I know that the last 2 episodes are a 2-parter, so it's just interesting that they would have this sort of, just a tournament episode at the end, So that was pretty cool. I wrote down Gilly and the Ring. That was very interesting. I like the variation on it, that it's not just another sorcerer, because we've had that before, but this time it's specifically a ring that he channels his magic into, basically, because he's not as powerful. He doesn't have the same skill set, basically, as Merlin does, So that was very, very cool. Just the ring, and then like him. I also like the healing spell he did, which Gaia said was it's an older one, but it is effective, where it basically superheats the skin and cauterizes the wound. Unfortunately, that created this giant beam of light and scorch marks on the door, and the guards saw, which sucked. Which for a second I was like, man, are we really just gonna like get rid of Gilly immediately? Or something's gonna happen here? It's like, no, that's not what's happening. But that would have been interesting, definitely. Ooh. Okay. I also like Gilly's backstory of I do like his backstory of the ring was his father's, but he never used his magic because he feared Uther. But at the same time, when it's like, oh well, he got attacked, why didn't he use his magic then? And it's like, well, he knew that's not what magic was for. Granted, Merlin does that all the friggin' time, Merlin does use magic like that all the time, but he only really uses his magic in defense. He doesn't really use it in attack, I guess. Like he doesn't instigate a fight using magic. It's always someone is attacking and he has to use magic to defend himself or defend Arthur. So yeah. But I did like that, that lesson at the end where it's like, okay, well, it's not that your father was afraid of magic, he just knew its true purpose. And yes, he also tried to hide magic from, Uther, but still, he did, he did still, like, he did still, understand the true nature of magic. So that was very interesting. I wrote down Uther. Uther joined the tournament, which was pretty cool, as the defending champion. I did like that, Actually, anytime Uther does get to fight, it is pretty cool, because last season with, I believe, the episode Excalibur, I believe that's what it was called, that was the episode where, Arthur was challenged to a duel with, I believe it was a zombie, basically, like a magic zombie, and Uther actually took him on, wielding Excalibur, and then he won. He actually did win that fight. So that's the thing is, when they're sort of giving him crap, he is still a very capable warrior. It's just that in the end, he's really only second best, Uther is really only second best, honestly, due to his age, Now, I would love to see, and this sort of goes back to what we talked about 2 episodes ago, I would love to see Uther Pendragon in his prime, I would love to see, what kind of a warrior he was in his prime, because, now, honestly, I want to think that, even though he is an older gentleman, I feel like he should give Arthur a run for his money, if we were power scaling everyone, and if we put Arthur here, I feel like Uther has to be around here. Now, that's a pretty, if I can get my head in front of my hands, or above my hands, that is a significant power gap, If Arthur's here, Uther is here, and then we could say, some of the other warriors are more down here, that's how Uther beat most of them. That is still a significant power gap, but I would think that it would still make for a great fight, even if Arthur does win, But it didn't seem to really go that direction, which is odd, that honestly, it kind of makes the power gap a lot larger, that Arthur had no troubles with beating Uther, whereas Uther was, giving it his all in that fight. So yeah. So I don't know. It's such a strange power gap, and I would assume that in his prime, Uther would be on level with where Arthur is now, But that's going into power scaling and everything, which is not something I thought we would ever talk about on Merlin, or at least not with, Uther and Arthur. So, yeah. I wrote down kill. So, this was also an interesting development. Gilly did kill that one guy, and then once he killed him, because, it's okay to kill people in this tournament. Then, after doing that, people started to respect him, hey, you're this skinny, lanky dude, but, you did well in there. You did well in that tournament, the little guy's pulling through, he's basically the underdog of the tournament. And so, having him be the underdog, and then, he beat this, really big dude. So then everyone's starting to respect him, and that starts to go to his head, especially after, his first conversation with Merlin. So that all starts to go to his head, and he's like, oh, I need to keep doing this, finally, Sorcerer is getting respect. So it did start to go to his head, but that's the thing is that, honestly, it shouldn't be that, well, you're killing people, so now people respect you. It should be, well, you're winning, and people respect you. It's just that he took it a step further and is going for the killing, basically. So, let's see. I wrote down conquered. So, just before Uther and Arthur had their fight, we did get an interesting bit of information that when Uther was Arthur's age, so I think it's safe to assume this is around 25, maybe somewhere between 20 and 25. We could go in and just compromise and say 22, which is my age, and God, he looks so much better than I do at the age of 22. Although, with his hair, I could probably look like I'm related to him. Distant cousin, I would say, though. Yeah, he probably gets the looks and the big muscles, and I got a beard. I make up for everything with the beard, I feel like. Not the point. Anywho. But interesting thing. So, when Uther was Arthur's age, let's say around 22-ish, he conquered Camelot. That is an interesting development because I believe it was at the beginning of season 2 when they found that vault, They found that secret treasure, and Uther comes in and was like, all right, so which of my predecessors is this, It's like, well, okay, shouldn't you know, if one of your, forefathers, one of your ancestors, conquered, or not conquered, but was laid to rest here. I'm getting my words confused. But he wouldn't. He doesn't really know, because none of the former kings were his ancestors, because he conquered Camelot. He took Camelot by force and became the new king, which is very interesting, which means Arthur will be the first of the Pendragon dynasty to inherit Camelot. And that's the thing, is that Uther is the first of the Pendragon dynasty overall, which is very interesting that he is the beginning of this dynasty because he conquered Camelot and became the king. That is really, really interesting. I like that little detail in there. It's not just that, well, this just happens to be the king, that this was the one that banned all magic. It's like, no, this is the one who came in, fucked shit up, took over. Later he did the whole magic purge, and then he not eliminated, I'm getting all my words confused. Then he succeeded to Arthur, basically. That is pretty cool. Honestly, it kind of reminds me of Game of Thrones with Robert Baratheon, where he was the first of the Baratheon dynasty after, hundreds of years of a Targaryen dynasty. Then he comes in and, conquers Westeros, basically, and then he becomes the king, the first Baratheon king of Westeros. And so it is sort of like that, It would honestly be like that, where it's like if in Game of Thrones they found some treasure, and some buried king, they don't really, know, because he's not one of Robert's. He's not an ancestor of Robert Baratheon. It's the exact same thing here. Uther is kind of like Robert Baratheon. But does that make Arthur Joffrey? No, because he's legitimate. That makes Morgana Joffrey. Except, well, and I guess that could be spoilers. I'm sorry. That's one spoiler for Game of Thrones. Sorry, that didn't even cross my mind that I was getting into spoilers there. Although, if you don't, whatever, spoilers, whatever. So yeah, Uther conquered Camelot, which is pretty cool. The next thing I wrote down was Uther versus Arthur. I really wanted to see that fight, I really wanted to see that fight, and I wanted it to be a legit fight, because Arthur took on many opponents, legit, and they were all good, well, some of them were really good fights, others, it was clear he was just so much better, like that first guy, who's swinging around his swords and everything, and Arthur just hits him once in the head, and he goes down. That is 100% an Indiana Jones moment, in Raiders of the Lost Ark, where the same looking dude has his swords, and he's going crazy, and Indy just shoots him, Spoilers, I guess, for Raiders, whatever. Go watch Raiders, go watch Game of Thrones, there you go. So, I was hoping, and especially because, Uther also had pretty legit fights, and he was winning, he was legitimately winning those fights. I was kind of hoping that their fight in the semifinals was going to be legit, but, you can definitely see, it's like, Arthur is not breaking a sweat, Arthur's not breaking a sweat, he's keeping the same demeanor. Uther is going all in on it, Uther is going all in on facing Arthur, but there is, that just shows how much of a power gap there is between, or I guess a skill gap or something, between Uther and Arthur, that while Uther is better than pretty much any other fighter in there, he is significantly outclassed by Arthur. But Arthur threw the match anyway, you know? Which, and again, I like that at the end where... I like that at the end where, you know, Uther is like, you know, yes, obviously I knew that you threw the match. Thank you for doing that for me, you know? Like, you would think, like, oh, he'd be pissed. Oh, I didn't win legitimately. But it's like, no, it's my son has given me the honor of being the champion one last time, you know? So, and I like him saying, you know, that it is an honorable thing to do for your father. And he's like, you know, I hope that one day if you have sons, that they afford you such a grace. It's like, oh my gosh, this is so touching. And then him saying, it's like, you are ready to be king now, which the way he says it is like, all right, you are ready to be king. This is the first time he's really said, you are ready to be king. If I died right now, you'd be a perfect king. It makes me think maybe, you know, with all the buildup we've had, especially with Morgana trying to, you know, take the throne and the visions of Queen Guinevere, it's like, are we building up to that? Are we building up to a succession? The succession of Uther Pendragon, you know? Are we building up to that for these final episodes? I don't know, but I'm very curious to see. And I also wrote down the final match between Gilly and Uther, which was interesting. And the whole thing with, you know, of course, you know, Gilly went down the same road that pretty much everyone has, like, oh, he's killed so many of us, so I should go ahead and kill him and do us a favor, you know? But the one thing I really did like about this was when Merlin went to go talk to the dragon about this, you know? Because normally, if there's anything where it's like, well, the king could be killed, the dragon's like, let him. I don't care. Let Uther die. Why should I care? This time, we finally got something different from the dragon when it's like, well, Uther could be killed. And he says, well, if Uther is killed by magic, then this will just harden Arthur's heart, you know? Like, because he said, at first he said, we have to hope that Arthur will bring about a change and will restore magic to the world, basically. You know? Which we've talked about on this show several times. We've talked about the fact that there are so many characters that put all their eggs in the basket of Arthur Pendragon. Which is why in the middle of this reaction I just shouted eggs. Like that's the thing. When he started saying that, I was just like, eggs. Alright. That was it. So, you know, we talk about that everyone is gambling. So many people are gambling on Arthur to bring about this great change, but no one is really putting in the time to change Arthur's heart about magic. So I like that finally the dragon is like, look, I'd love Uther to be dead as much as the next magic guy, but this could harden Arthur's heart towards magic, you know? It could permanently set Arthur against magic. So we're going to have probably... So either you can let this happen and Uther dies and, you know, Arthur completely goes against magic, or you sacrifice Gilly, you know? And I did like that conversation between Merlin and the dragon with talking about, you know, how difficult of a choice this is, you know? But luckily, you know, because Merlin was there to make sure that you know, Gilly didn't kill Uther. You know, he basically reversed a lot of his magic, and he also it did get through to Gilly. It's like, no, I can't do this. You know, I shouldn't do this, and he lost, which is good. He lost, and then I did like the conversation. I'm glad that the lesson stuck with him. You know. Like, the lesson really did sink in for him, which is really good. That, you know, we can't just kill him, you know? And I like him coming to the realization that his father wasn't, you know, a coward or afraid of magic. It was that his father respected magic and knew what its purpose was for. So that's all really good. I wish we could sync that in with Morgana. granted, Merlin hasn't told Morgana that he has magic, you know? Whereas he just completely told Gilly right there. Which, yeah, in hindsight, that's still going to be probably Merlin's biggest mistake, is not telling Morgana about his magic, you know, because I think that honestly, I think honestly it is Merlin's fault that Morgana turned. Now, I think everything she does now is on her, not really on Merlin, but her turning to the dark side, that is on Merlin, and I hope at some point they acknowledge that, you know? Maybe, because this is what should have happened with Morgana, is he reveals that he has magic, even if she's mad at first, you know, and tries to kill Uther. If she stops and she doesn't go through with it, and she comes around, and then, you know, the two of them are friends again, you know? I wish that had happened, but hopefully the show acknowledges the failure of not telling Morgana. I hope that it would be great if the show recognized Merlin's failure with Morgana. I don't know. They haven't yet, but I hope... I would really like if they did that. If they acknowledged Merlin's failure. So, yeah. Which, I mean, yes, it is also on Gaius, too. Because Gaius wanted to, you know, keep her out of it and everything. But her turning is on Merlin. But I will say, and again, this is what happened in Supergirl too. You know, there was an episode of Supergirl with Lena Luthor, and it's like, oh, is she going bad? Well, you know, Supergirl, you know, went to Lena, and this is a recent episode too, and she said, you know, what I did has led you to this point, and I'm sorry. But what you do, like, I'm not going to be blamed for anything else that you do. Whatever you do is on you now. That is honestly the same thing happening in Merlin. Is that, yes, it is Merlin's fault that she got to this point. But honestly, at this point, whatever she does is her responsibility and not Merlin's. And yes, I am still going off of last episode when she tried to get one of her best friends executed. So, yeah. It's like, that's not on Merlin. The fact that Morgana has turned evil, that is on Merlin. But anything she does now, that is on her, basically. So, yeah. I hope the show will somehow, some way, someday, acknowledge Merlin's failure. Anyway, that is pretty much all I wrote down for this episode. Great episode. Really enjoyed it. Glad we got one more tournament in there before the end of the season. But yeah, next episode is the beginning of the 2-part finale for Season 3. And I'm just going to assume it's going to be crazy. So yeah, that is pretty much it. With all that being said, I'm Alex from 7th Hour Films, and I will see you guys next time. Take care. Alright guys, thanks for watching this video. If you want to watch more of my Merlin reactions, you can click on the playlist, you can subscribe if you haven't done that already, and be sure you hit that notification bell. You can support me on Patreon and follow me on social media, links below in the description. See you guys later.